So this first mindfulness training is focused on the protection of life through the practice of decreasing violence within ourselves, within our families, and within our communities, by developing our skills of understanding another's point of view, and by living with compassion. And one important aspect of this training guides us to avoid either starting or being drawn into ideological wars, which are different ideas that are vying to be the right one. And Thich Nhat Hahn says that our look has to be wide and open so that we can see without being caught in ideologies and dogmas. And he also talks about how people justify killing as a means of protection, but hurting others doesn't really make us safe. Hurting or killing those we think are our enemy will only make more enemies, as violence perpetuates suffering. And when we see life through the truth of our interbeing, we see that when we kill someone else, we kill ourselves. And it's only through understanding and love that we can actually transform suffering. And Thich Nhat Hahn points out that while such things as gun laws and agreements to limit the development of nuclear arms may be helpful, that this type of measure does not address the underlying issues that cause violence. And these are people's suffering, our violence, our anger, and even our mental illness. And he really emphasizes that it's fear that drives our need to protect ourselves. And our suspicion of others prevents us from reconciliation. And to create peace, we must address the large amount of fear that we each carry as human beings. For when people do not harbor fear, anger, and suspicion, they have little need for weapons. Thich Nhat Hahn saw that the path to peace is one of removing fear, anger, and suspicion from both sides of opposing views. And to reduce the fear, anger, and suspicion in the world, we have to first reduce them within ourselves. And we all have the seeds of violence, hatred, and discrimination in the depths of our consciousness. And when these seeds are encouraged to grow, we suffer. And so practicing mindfulness means that instead of acting on what we feel like doing when we're provoked, we go back to our breathing and we calm our body and we stop our thinking and we bring our mind home to our body in the present moment. It is through mindfulness practice that we become aware of our motivations, our thoughts, our actions and their consequences, and the motives that we carry behind the words we speak. So understanding ourselves, we begin to gain clarity on our part in every situation. We can catch the misperceptions and the projections that our minds are invested in, and the thoughts which prevent us from experiencing others as human beings who are like us, with similar feelings, motivations, and concerns. And without developing understanding and compassion, we have little chance of helping in situations where there's tension between people. And he was pointing out how anything that someone says can be distorted by another person's mind to create more anger, fear, and suspicion. And this is why we must become familiar with how the play of our own minds can distort the intentions of others. And Thich Nhat Hahn offers 2 concrete practices to take care of ourselves when we feel hurt or threatened, which are the situations when we tend to feel violence, the seeds of violence. And these practices are meant so that we don't unintentionally nurture the violence and fear and discrimination that comes up. And the first one is walking meditation. And walking in mindfulness is one of the best ways to take care of the body and the mind when we feel agitated. As we walk, we recognize, now the seeds of violence are manifesting within me. And then we allow ourselves to recognize how much we are suffering in those moments of violent thoughts arising. And while we are watching this, the mindfulness is present, helping us to hold our suffering so that we are not overwhelmed by it. And he points out that this is the practice of the first noble truth, recognizing our suffering, or that suffering is. But I found this very interesting, that he's pointing out that when we feel angry or hateful, we are actually suffering. And so it's important to take a moment and realize that is part of our suffering. And after walking with this awareness for a time, we will be able to feel compassion for ourselves because we have understood how much we are suffering. And with that presence of compassion and mindfulness, we have a chance to look deeply into our suffering and see its roots. And this is the practice of the second noble truth, which is recognizing the cause of our suffering. And in this process, we may recognize not only our own suffering, but the suffering of our ancestors and the collective suffering. And this type of insight that can come from the mindfulness walking leads to what the Buddhists call right view. And it is through this type of processing through mindfulness that right view arises and diminishes our suffering and helps us to glimpse the third noble truth, which is the transformation of suffering into happiness. And so then we are not likely to say anything that will hurt someone else once we get to this place. And yet it is a tendency of our minds to always pull us back to our feeling of having been hurt and wanting to hurt in return. That is just such a compulsive mind process. And mindfulness steps are a wonderful way to help transform this state of mind obsession and turn it from a violent one to a non-violent one. And so as we transform our walking path into a path of meditation, our feet will gradually come to take every step with full awareness. Our breathing will come into harmony with our steps, and our mind will naturally be at ease. Every step causing a stream of calming energy to flow through us. And so a developed practice of mindful walking is a powerful tool of transformation. And Thich Nhat Hahn suggests that we each practice a walking meditation every day. He points out that we each walk somewhere every day, and that we should just pick some place, like walking up the stairs or walking up our driveway or walking from the living room to the bedroom at night or walking between trees, and to just choose that as our place that we will slow down and practice walking meditation. And the second offering is, he says that sharing the practice is very important. That learning ways to protect life and stopping others from killing is something that we can do most successfully as a collective. Together we can discuss what we can do to prevent more violence in the world. And there are many creative and effective ways that we can contribute to a safer and more peaceful world. And we are more likely to discover these ways if we practice and share together. And though there's encouragement to develop a local sangha for this purpose, I'm really looking forward to exploring how we can expand peaceful actions in the world through this global community here.